And happy Saturday, and welcome to the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, March 6th, 2021. We're back here again this week. We got an exciting program today. I want you guys to stay for the whole thing because we got a lot to talk about. Uh, COVID vaccines, states opening up that shouldn't be doing that. But we got a special guest in the second segment, Thomas McLaurin. You might not know the last name McLaurin, but he's a Floyd. He is George Floyd's first cousin. He's going to be here with us in the second segment to talk about something called the George Floyd Memorial Center that will be here in Raleigh, North Carolina. So stay around for that. But in the meantime, this guy named Val Atkinson, hey Val, is here with us again this week. Our third banana, Dr. McFarland, is in Jamaica this week, and the reception on her internet wasn't so great. So she's going to be back with us next week. So I won't even talk about her being in Jamaica. I'm mad, Val. Nicole bailed on us, and she's in the warm, sunny Jamaica, but that's where her family's from. So she's down there with family. But let's get to business, Val. We have passed 500,000 people dead from COVID. We have passed 50 million people vaccinated for COVID. We've passed 60 million people who have been diagnosed with COVID in the United States. Those are big numbers, Val. And this is the year anniversary of the deal. And the deal started because we started talking about this thing called COVID that nobody was sure that was going to last this long. How did we get here, Val? Why has it been a whole year that we've dealt with COVID? And it's likely to be, if you listen to people like Anthony Fauci and so on and so forth, they're saying it's going to be this time next year before we're back to normal.
Back to normal is the key. That's what everybody wants, and we don't know exactly when that's going to be or what it's going to look like. Because people are talking now, Ed, about the new normal. So those who are looking to get back to exactly the way it used to be may find that is a little bit difficult, and it may not be the exact way we thought it would be. So when we talk about getting back, that's going to be questionable. I think the thing that we need to really wrap our heads around right now is what do we do to help it be a smooth journey and stay away from those kinds of things that really are going to put bumps in the road, such as the things that the governor of Texas is trying to do, getting rid of all of the constraints, getting rid of social distancing and even wearing a mask and that sort of thing. That's not going to happen. We got here partly because of our culture, to answer your question directly, Ed. And I say that, and I take this position primarily because there are countries and sections and parts of the world that have handled COVID much better than we've done here. And there's no country in the world that can parallel us as far as economic power, as far as technology is concerned, or as far as number of people who are highly educated and good at what they do. And yet we can't handle COVID as well as some other countries. Question, why? And I say it's culture. We have a overarching, overextending abidance for something called freedom, choice. We want it our way. We want exceptions. We listen to the rules. We listen to the policy. And the first thing we ask, well, what are the exceptions? How can I get out of this? Is this for everybody? Is it for me? Is it for all the time? What are the exceptions? And having that attitude when we're trying to get to something called herd immunity is very difficult, and it's not helpful at all. Yeah. That's what hurt us. That's what's got us to where we are. And we're going to have to drop some of that. And we're going to, 6 feet is 6 feet. Wearing a mask is a mask. washing hands, using sanitizer. Everybody's got to do it. And get your shots, become vaccinated. If everybody does all of those things all the time, COVID is dead.
Well, COVID would be dead, but a lot of people are still dying, Val. I just told you that we're up to 541,000 people dead. The last number I saw, and I'm pretty sure it's higher than that now. And you mentioned the state of Texas and other states opening up, Alabama, uh, even in North Carolina where we are, the governors relaxed some restrictions. And I was before we came on this morning, I was watching the high school girls basketball championship game, and there were people in the stands, and there was high school football Friday night in North Carolina, and there were people in the stands. Are we incapable? I just I listen to you talk about how we always want these exceptions. Are we just incapable? I mean, are we going to have to depend on luck in getting our own vaccine that we can't depend on Texas? Because in the United States, there's no borders between states really. There are borders on the map, but you can go anywhere in the United States without a passport, right, to another state. You can't stop somebody from going from Texas to Louisiana and from Louisiana to getting on a plane and flying to Raleigh and maybe having COVID. I mean, that's what my fear is. Is there anything at all that Joe Biden and the administration can do, or are we just going to have to continue to deal with Republican governors are going to be in one camp, and they're in that camp of doing crazy stuff like DeSantis and like Abbott, and we just sort of going to have to fend for ourselves?
I wish that I had the answer to that, Ed. I tell you, I'd give it to you in the world right now, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take an effort from the rest of us to contain those who have gone off the reservation, as it were, in terms of sanity, it seems to me. What we've got to do is do our part, do what we think needs to be done. One thing we cannot do, we cannot control the actions of others. So if we are waiting for others to do the right thing in this battle against COVID, I would say you do what you know needs to be done. And when you get a chance, like Ed and I, tell others what needs to be done. And that's about the limit of your capability. Do what you need to be doing. Ask others to do the right thing. Give information, credible, good information to people who need it. And I hate to say it, but hope for the best.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what we're down to, Val, is hoping for the best. Let's switch gears a little bit, a little bit related, because COVID relief has been going through the House and Senate. And I do want to talk about that in some detail a little bit later on. But centrist, I hate this whole notion of centrist Democrats. People like Joe Manchin.
We used to call them Blue Dog Democrats.
Yeah, and Christine Sinema from out in Arizona. They are holding a tremendous amount of power. So one thing I did before we came out, Val, I went and looked at how many people live in West Virginia. There's 1.76 million, according to the latest numbers that are out there. In Wake County, Durham County, Franklin County, and Johnston County, North Carolina, there are 2.1 million people. They call that the Triangle area. We can throw in Orange County and get a few more people in there. There's more people in the Triangle area. So within a 40-mile radius of where I'm talking from right now than the whole state of West Virginia. But they have two senators, and one of those senators that's supposed to be a Democrat, that caucuses with the Democrats, wields a tremendous amount of power. And then so I looked at the state of Wyoming, which has 560,000 people. So if you add the people from West Virginia and Wyoming, 4 senators between them are wielding a tremendous amount of power, more power than the people who live in the Triangle area of North Carolina. That's a long way around saying we're still in a world of trouble because Republicans have figured out how to maintain power without being in power if you have centrist Democrats that are going to cross over and kill things like a $15 minimum wage. Uh, so here's my question, Val. If I say Joe Manchin, what do you say? What your stream of consciousness on a person like Joe Manchin?
When you say Joe Manchin, I think the First Amendment. I'm sorry, I think Article 1, not the First Amendment, but Article 1 of the Constitution. Because that's where it all started. When we decided what kind of government we were going to have, its representation, and how Congress was going to be constructed and that kind of thing, we did everything we could to make sure that the slave-holding states would come in and be a part of the Union. So we gave them all kinds of leeway and that sort of thing. And we're paying for it now. You just gave out the numbers, between West Virginia and Wyoming, they got 4 senators, and you look at the triangle area, and we got none actually just for the triangle area. It's an abomination. It all goes back to that, because what Republicans have done, they've taken advantage of the way the rules are written right now. And they understand they don't have to, as you say, Ed, they don't have to be in power to wield the power. They understand how the rules are written, and they only need one guy, because of the way the Senate rules are written, one guy to say, I don't agree. And then everything has to come to a screeching halt. And with a 50-50 Senate, Democrat and Republican, where you need the vice president to break the tie, whoever the minority party is, they have a lot of power, because all they got to do is chip off one of your senators. In this case, let's go back and talk about Joe Manchin. And Joe Manchin understands the power he has been given in a 50-50 Senate. He understands that the Democratic Party, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, can't do a thing that he doesn't want them to do. He blocks it up. There was this old question about the organs of the body, arguing among one another which was the most important organ in the body. And everybody was talking about the brain and the this and the that. And somebody says, well, the brain is not really an organ. Well, but it does everything. And then some voice from way in the rear says, I'm the most important organ in the body. I am the anus. And if I stop up, don't nothing happen. Everybody get killed. So, and that's who Manchin is. He's the anus. Okay.
Well, see, I knew you would have a good story for me. I said stream of consciousness. What is Joe Manchin? That's excellent. You're watching The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. He's a part-time comedian as well. You can catch him sometimes doing his act. That was funny, Val. Before we run out of time in this segment, I want to switch gears a little bit, talk about something real serious. We're going to get back to Congress in the third segment, but in the second segment, Val, I invited a guy on. His name is Thomas McLaurin. He lives in Atlanta, but he's the first cousin of George Floyd. And on Monday up in Minnesota, Derek Chauvin's trial is supposed to start. There's some question about that. I know there's been some legal wrangling within the last 48 hours because of the exact charges that might be charged against Derek Chauvin for murdering George Floyd. I'm emphatic about that. We all saw it on camera. He murdered George Floyd. It's just a question of whether or not there's going to be justice for it. So Thomas McLaurin is going to be in with us after the break. But Val, talk to me real quick about the Derek Chauvin and the likelihood that we may end up disappointed. What do you think? I mean, I know you don't know, and I don't either. But if you put on your prognostication hat, uh, do you think anything's going to come out of that trial of Derek Chauvin?
I think, again, saying we don't know, we're just guessing here. But in my mind's eye, it says that he will be convicted of something, but probably a lesser charge than everybody wants. The United States is being viewed by the whole world right now. And we are about optics if we're not about anything else. And we don't want to have it appear that these police officers can murder people of color, unarmed people of color with impunity. And it's been happening over and over again. And it doesn't matter how much light is shown on them while they're doing it or as they do it. They still get away with murder. And you can go back to the Rodney King trial and come on up to all of those kinds of things that's happened up until this date. And for that reason, I think he'll be convicted of something. But the odds, if the only charge on the table were first-degree murder, I would not place a bet that he would be convicted of that. Because all you need in our criminal justice system, all you need is one juror to say, I am not totally convinced that this guy is guilty. And he is not guilty.
Right. Yeah.
Therefore, I think he'll be convicted, but of something less than first degree murder.
Yeah, I hear you. And I'm thinking the same thing, Val. So that's a good place for us to take a break. So when we come back, Thomas McLaurin from the George Floyd Memorial Center, who's also first cousin to George Floyd, whose uncle is George Floyd Sr., whose mother was the brother of George Floyd Sr., and they're all from Sampson County, North Carolina. You knew George was born in Fayetteville. A lot was made of the fact that he was from Houston, Texas. He did graduate from high school in Texas. He was murdered in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which shows you how folks get around in the United States. So anyway, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, Thomas McLaurin will be with us. You're watching The Deal. And welcome back to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, March 6, 2021. And in the first segment, I told you that we had a special guest in today. His name is Thomas McLaurin, and he's with the George Floyd Memorial Center. And I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time because I know he's got a lot to do. And I harassed him about coming on the show. So here he is. Thomas McLaurin, welcome to The Deal.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I appreciate you bringing me on to talk with you and to your wonderful audience and everybody that follows you. So this is an honor for me.
Well, no, it's an honor for me. You know, the world works real funny, Thomas. We crossed paths in the lobby of an office where my office is, and you happened to be there with a group of folks having a meeting, and didn't know you from anybody, and we just started talking, and how worlds collide sometimes. We're probably related if we look deep enough.
Exactly.
Because what a lot of people don't know, Thomas, is that George Floyd is a North Carolinian in the truest sense of the word, because anybody that's born here, we claim them. But you're currently in Atlanta. Tell me first a little bit about yourself, and then I want to dig into George and what the center is supposed to do.
Okay. Yes, as you mentioned, I am currently in Atlanta, but I'm originally from North Carolina, and I moved to Atlanta back in the 80s because at that time, Atlanta was the place to go. As everybody was saying, hey, we need to get out of the sticks and and go find something. Just so happens while I was at graduate school up at North Carolina Central, I was actually offered a teaching job in Georgia. I interviewed with several school systems. One that I remember was a guy from Chicago. I interviewed with the Chicago city schools, and when he started telling me about the weather there, I said, "Well, man, I'm from southeastern North Carolina, and I can't deal with cold weather." So, so I took the job in Georgia and I moved down here. But going back to my roots, I'm originally from Sampson County, a little town called Roseboro. Grew up there, went to Lakewood High School, graduated, went to East Carolina first, and played a little football there. Got my undergraduate degree, then went to North Carolina Central. As I said, I did move here to Georgia, got down here, started a family, got stuck, but my roots are still in North Carolina.
Yeah, and that's like a lot of us, Thomas. We always come back to North Carolina. I've been all kinds of places, and so has Val as well. What you're doing now is something called the George Floyd Memorial Center.
Yes.
We know about a year ago George was murdered, and I say that emphatically every time anybody asks me. He was murdered in Minnesota, at a place where I have been before, in that very store, which
Wow.
was very. It moved me a lot because I spent a lot of time in Minneapolis over the years for work, and when I saw the store, saw the area, know the area very well. It always reminds me North Carolinians end up everywhere,
Right.
and we travel around, and it could have been me or you or anybody else in another place and time too. And so the murder of George moved people around the world and around the country. There were protests all spring and summer, and it leads us to where we are now. Derek Chauvin goes on trial starting on Monday. Hopefully, it'll get going, and he'll be convicted. Uh, I don't want to necessarily talk about Derek Chauvin. We know he's a murderer. I want to talk about George
Right.
and this whole idea behind the Memorial Center and what it is, and is it going to be related to North Carolina in any way? And then exactly what you hope to accomplish by having a George Floyd Memorial.
Right. Okay. Well, awesome. And again, thank you for this platform and for what you do, getting topics such as George murder, and I'm sure other topics out there to people because we do know that we live in an information age, and we've got all sorts of ways in which we can get our information. But when you can talk directly with someone who may have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in the nation, it really speaks a lot to you, to Val, and to all that are out there doing the right thing. So I appreciate that. But kind of taking you back a little bit, if I may, I want to just click on I guess call this a screensaver, and just show the folks a picture. This is a picture of the Floyd family. If you look on the right hand side of the picture, you'll see a lady there with white hair and purple, and that's Gertha Floyd. She was married to Neil Floyd. Now, both of those folks were my grandparents. And you'll see some siblings there, and you'll actually see sort of in the back, sort of slightly to the left, there's a picture that's superimposed, and that's one of the brothers, Bill Floyd, who actually passed away in 1981. But these are all siblings. I'll start with the lady in white. That's my mother. Her name was Annie Floyd McLaurin. She married Marion McLaurin from Roseboro, North Carolina. She lived outside of Clinton, North Carolina. And then you see some other folks there, but I particularly want to highlight the gentleman on the left with the black shirt and a Chicago Cubs baseball cap. That is George Floyd Sr. My mother was the oldest of 8 siblings. Well, she had 7 siblings, I'm sorry. She was the oldest, and George Floyd Sr. was her third to the last brother. Now, if you look there's another guy in another cap that's between my grandmother and my aunt. His name is Roger Floyd. Roger actually lives in Raleigh. Roger just retired from Allstate Insurance Agent. He was agency. He was an agent for 46 years. Some of you that are listening may have had him as your Allstate client. As your Allstate agent, I should say. His office was located off of Six Forks Drive up there, the Floyd Insurance Agency. But after George was murdered, Roger and I started talking and said, you know, we need to do something to commemorate George's life. Everybody knows about his death. We pray that, you know, the trial will go the way of justice. That's all we're seeking is justice. But the name George Floyd is known all over the world. And so we decided it was time to do something. And we're using the word center because we do know that there's really all over the U.S. because I've talked with several people and several entities that have actually started George Floyd foundations. I mean, even some colleges. I talked with the president and the board of directors at Goddard College, which is in Vermont. Can you imagine there's a George Floyd Center or George Floyd Memorial in Vermont? And so they wanted to do something because right now the whole world is looking at equity and justice. And so we said, well, we want to create the George Floyd Memorial Center because we want it to be a place of refuge for those who may be hurting. We want it to be a place to commemorate George. We want it to be a place of learning. And so we came up with this idea of creating various pillars to go along with it. We want to do scholarships to try to help those who may not have the opportunity to go to school or to get all the funding they need. We want to try to help them that way. We want to do some education towards understanding what it means to be Black, some Black history. Because for whatever reason, when you look at a lot of nationalities, they teach their children about their history. But for some reason, everybody wants us to forget our history. You know, I've heard people say, well, slavery happened a long time ago. Y'all need to forget that. That's over and done with. I didn't have any slaves and didn't have anything to do with any slaves and so forth and so on. But yet you are benefiting from what happened from the 1600s through the late 1800s. You're benefiting from that and you're still benefiting from it. And we as Black people, we're still starting 10 yards behind the start line.
Yeah.
You know, when the gun goes off, we've got to run an extra 10 yards just to get to where you started. And so we wanted to create some programs and some things to really help build up who we are. And quite obviously, the name George Floyd is known around the world. So why not do it in the name of someone who basically was the tipping point for what has happened to us for hundreds of years?
Yeah. You know, Val, one of the things I know you'd be interested in, Roger is also a Kappa. And Val is too, and,
Okay.
and frequently we have Kappas on the program, and we were hoping that Roger could be here today, but unfortunately he had some health concerns. So I do want to send my best wishes to Roger, and hopefully the next time you guys come on that he'll be with us. But Val, as you're listening to Thomas, one of the things that strikes me is that again, people don't ever know the whole story, right? It's this North Carolina family of really nice people, college educated, business owners or whatever, and how George has been painted as something of an anomaly that he I won't say that there's a lot of people who said that he deserved the situation he was in, but there are people who say that, Val. There are people who think of George as just some Black guy who ended up at the wrong place at the wrong time. And it's not. This is a family, a real family that has a family member that's been lost. As you're listening to Thomas, what do you think about, how to memorialize someone like George? And what should we be doing to make sure people know a fuller story about George?
Well, I was touched and I was real glad to see when Thomas put up the photo of that family because that's where it all starts. And when you talk about a family having roots, a family still being together, you talk about the beginning of a culture and how we value one another and how we are able to withstand the winds that are not in our favor. And that means a lot. So having that family and knowing from whence you come and North Carolina having to be that place, I think it was a very good decision. I think it was the right decision to come back to North Carolina and say, this is where we want our center to be, to talk about George Floyd and all that he has done and what's going on after him. So I take my cap off to Thomas, not only because he's a great Eagle from North Carolina Central, but for what he's done, what he is doing now to get this center going. And I'd like to also remark, Thomas, that in addition to what A and I are going to try to do here on the deal, I'm opening up Connections, which is our terrestrial radio talk show, to you and your project. At any time we can get you on to get the message out to people about what you're doing, how and why, so you can get the local support from the Triangle area and Eastern North Carolina, because that's where our signals go, all the way from Raleigh to the coast and up as north as far as Petersburg, Virginia, and all the way down south to beyond Fayetteville. So that's a pretty big circle. And what we want to do is to make sure the people in that area know who you are, know what you're doing, and welcome you with open arms and support your efforts. So this is a formal, informal invitation standing to come on and be a part of our show of Connections.
Yeah, Thomas, and
thank you so much, Val. Thank you.
Yeah, Thomas, and obviously the deal is your new home too, and we expect to be doing things over the years. One of the things that you mentioned is that your uncle had a agency on Six Forks Road, and that's where we met, on Six Forks Road at my office. And like I said, you were in the lobby, and the reason when you were in Raleigh is exactly why is the George Floyd Memorial Center? Why were y'all meeting in Raleigh, North Carolina, of all places?
Well, a couple of reasons. We thought about where we wanted to have the center. When George's father, my uncle, and George's mother were together, they lived in Fayetteville. And we thought about Fayetteville as a place, but we realized that Raleigh might be the better place to actually have the center. A couple of reasons. It's the capital of North Carolina, sort of in the center of North Carolina. There's a lot more tourist attractions, because what we're looking at doing is going to go beyond the scope of North Carolina. When I saw people in Europe, in the Middle East, and in Asia protesting after what happened, I knew that this was much more than a Wake County, Cumberland County, Sampson County phenomenon. I knew this was much more than a Southeastern United States phenomenon. And I also knew that this was a lot more than a Western Hemisphere phenomenon. So what better place to create a center as what we're doing than a place that has, number one, the seat of government in the state, number two, the research triangle, number three, a major airport, number four, regardless of where you go, people want to eat. So restaurants, other tourist attractions, various things like that. So Raleigh was the perfect place for what it is that we want to do, to attract those that would come and pay homage to George, and also learn and grow from the programs that we're going to put on and so forth. Now, everything is not necessarily going to be in Raleigh, because as we all know right now, we're remote. I mean, I'm with you guys right now, but I'm over 400 miles away. So we're going to do a lot of remote programming, and eventually our goal is to create a brick and mortar center with a museum, and I can't divulge my aces right now, but I've also gotten the support of a few higher ups when it comes to creating the museum that we'll talk about, another time. But anyway, Raleigh was the better place that we figured right now to try to get this going. And from there, it's almost like the, what do you call the centerpiece of a bicycle wheel? The hub.
The hub.
And then you got your spokes going out. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
that's why we looked at Raleigh.
Well, that's a good story, Thomas, and we're coming up on time for a break. But I wanted to make sure that folks know, you see the poster in the background for the George Floyd Memorial Center. That's GeorgeFloydMC.org. Like Thomas said, there's a lot of other foundations out there, but this is the family right here. This is the family that's doing this. The George Floyd Memorial Center. These are folks from North Carolina. These are folks from right down the road from where I grew up. George grew up, was born no more than 10 miles from where I was born. And Thomas lived no more than 15 miles from where I live. Spivey's Corner is a place I know very well. Roseboro, I got cousins down there. So, I mean, he's part of the family now, Val. We've adopted the Floyd family, and we're going to wrap them up and make sure we get them whatever they need to get the word out about the George Floyd Memorial Center. Before we leave, Thomas, anything else you want to tell us in what's coming up or how you need our help or the listeners' help?
Well, this right here is definitely to start this and the radio broadcast and getting the word out. And where we are right now is we're still putting the pieces together. We're actually working on a grant piece so that we can get some funding, but we are accepting donations from folks so that we can create our programming. Regardless of what we say, yes, we are a nonprofit, but it does take money to do things. And so we would love for people to go to our website, georgefloydmc.org, and make donations, help us out, but also get the word out there that the center is coming. The center is here. And what we're going to do is give back. In fact, our motto is that we are definitely, I have to read it and make sure I don't mess it up because it's a good one, achieving greatness through dedicated service. And so that's our thing. George, if he could be here right now, he would probably ask, what in the world is all this all about? Why are y'all keeping up such a fuss over my name? But because of what happened to him, we want to serve. We want to give. Dr. King said we all can be great, but we have to serve.
I hear you, Thomas. That's Thomas McLaurin with the George Floyd Memorial Center. He's also a family member, a real live one. And one other ironic twist, Thomas, the service that they had in North Carolina, my pastor from my church where I grew up did the opening prayer for George's funeral. So you see how, again, things are connected. Reverend Sutton at McLean's Chapel Free Will Baptist Church, who also preaches down in Hoke County at the Cape Fear Conference Center B, was the pastor who opened up the ceremony there. So, that just shows you how connected all this is.
Exactly. It's funny because growing up, I went to St. Thomas AME Zion Church in Roseboro, and we were part of the Cape Fear Conference. So yeah, I remember all those things. But the thing that really struck me was everybody wanted a piece of George. So, of course, they ended up having 3 services. They had one in Minneapolis where he was killed. They had one, of course, the final one in Texas where he grew up basically after his mother and my uncle divorced. And he's buried next to his mother. But the family in North Carolina said, we want to show everybody what we do whenever we have church. And so that's one of the reasons why we had the service there in North Carolina, because we knew it was not going to be a political thing. We knew it was not going to be a thing where we're trying to get any type of publicity. We knew it was going to be a real thing where we connected with family and connected with God and just gave God back his gift that he gave to us.
Yeah, it reminded me so much of all the funerals I've been to in Sampson County and Harnett County. It was a homegoing, and it was done the right way. So, Thomas McLaurin, thank you so much. We'll have you back soon. Val, stay right there. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to finish talking about politics, and we want to talk about this. What's likely to happen with the budget or the Recovery Act passage once it goes back to the House. So you're watching The Deal. We'll be back in a minute.
Our lives have been turned upside down by COVID-19. When a vaccine becomes available, it's critical that all of us get it. What we do as individuals will impact everyone's health, including those who can't get the vaccine. We won't get through this unless everyone takes part. Now is the time to get up to date on all recommended vaccines for both kids and adults. Experts say it's more important than ever for everyone to get their flu vaccine this year. And if you're older, you should get both the flu and pneumonia vaccines, since both illnesses can make COVID-19 even worse. Vaccines are available at a lot of convenient places, so be an example for friends and loved ones and encourage them to get vaccinated too. We all want to reunite, travel, and get back to school and work. But that means we all need to get on board. This is the time to do what's right for each other. Get vaccinated. It's our best shot.
And welcome back to The Deal. This is our third segment of The Deal. And I hope you stayed around and watched Thomas McLaurin from the George Floyd Memorial Center. It was very fortuitous meeting him. I think, I'm looking forward to a long relationship with the center and making sure that folks, especially folks in North Carolina, I know people watch us from all over the place, but if you're watching from here in North Carolina, to help out our folks. These are our folks, and the Floyd family is a group of college-educated, hard-working folks, own businesses, done all kind of things. And I know George Floyd has been painted as something different. He's not. He's one of us. We need to wrap them up, and we need to hope that people in Minnesota do the right thing. In Derek Chauvin's case that starts on Monday. Val, Thomas was, having him on, I think was great for us, and hopefully we can have him on Connections as well.
Absolutely. And we offered and extended invitations for him to participate with us from time to time. So we think it was a good start. We appreciate the opportunity, and we look forward to working with him as time goes by.
Yeah. So let's jump back into the dirty business, right? The politics. The reason why we come here on Saturdays, and we in the first segment we talked about your buddy Joe Manchin, and we got a very good visual of what you think about Senator Manchin. But he can't wield all this power without the Republicans lurking in the background. And you talked about that as well. One of the things that bothers me, Val, is that the Republicans are very shrewd at changing the subject. This week, there's been a lot of talk about Dr. Seuss and Mr. Potato Head and everything else, but the fact that more people are dying. That they never came up with a plan for healthcare. That they tried to talk over everybody during the hearings for 1-6 and tried to make like it didn't happen. And what's all this Mr. Potato Head and Dr. Seuss nonsense that we're hearing from the Republicans?
Well, you hit it right on the head, Ed, the nail on the head when you talk about changing subjects. And that's what they do very, very well. They're in a perfect position right now that they don't have to project policy. They don't have to enact policy. They don't have to solve any problems. All they have to do is disagree with whatever the Democrats try to do or whatever they decide they'd like to do. And they're good at this. They're excellent. They take a look at a conversation or an issue that's going on, and they reach inside and pull out something that they can talk about. It doesn't matter that the issue is talking about or going down a road to solve problems that affect the majority of Americans or whatever. They want to talk about the process as to how you get there, or an example of something that happened in the past that is not congruent with what you're trying to do right now. I mean, it's just so silly sometimes, but they are there as the opposition party to give Democrats a lot of guff. Now, I want to blame Democrats partly in this because once they tried to stop the train from going north to south and to put it on an east-west kind of trajectory, we don't have to hop on that train with them. And we need to just keep going north-south. We allow them to change our trajectory. We allow them to change the tenor. And the media helps sometimes. It helps the Republicans because instead of staying on this north-south trajectory, the media asks, well, what about this? What's going to happen if we go further west? And what's going to happen if we change and do a 180 and go all the way east? And then the Democrats abide that suit and they talk about East-West. Was it that easy to get you knocked off your track and whatever? So Democrats bear some responsibility here too, and the media, and that comes to you and I, Ed. We need to be able to say sometimes in the media, well, that's not the focus of our subject at this time. We may have a show on that later, but today we're talking about X or Y. But the Republicans and the right wing have become very efficient at knocking the Democrats off of their subject matter, bringing up things that are 180 degrees from what the Democrats want to talk about. And the media helps in this because it's news. Because the media ain't about helping Democrats or Republicans. They're about creating drama. They're about having high ratings and doing both of those things, because drama and high ratings means more money,
right,
through commercials. So if you're the Democrats and you allow the media to knock you off your track trying to make money, well, that's on you.
Yeah.
You've got to decide, and you've got to tell that media talking head, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about X. Now, if you want to talk about X, we can talk all day. If you want to talk about Y, you need to get another guest, or we need to have another appointment to come back later. You got to be tough.
Sure.
And you got to don't let people knock you off your path.
Well, speaking of being knocked off the path, two things that really bothered me about this compromise going on with the Recovery Act. The $1,400 is not going to go to as many people as before. Maybe the cutoff is okay. I mean, I think the cutoff is around $75,000 for a single person who wouldn't get it, which, I could make a case for, right? A family, making $160,000, the cutoff is there. But the fact is, everybody that got it before won't get it this time. They also made a compromise in the Senate where they reduced the amount of extra weekly benefit on unemployment to $300 from $400, but extended it through September the 6th. And I guess the one thing that bothers me the most, Val, is they found a way to decouple the minimum wage from the bill altogether. And they even had a separate vote, and Christine Sinema gets up and puts a thumbs down. I guess she wanted to be, channel John McCain or something. I don't know. But what do you think about this, the $15 minimum wage? If you add the number up, it's still only $20-some thousand a year. And while it's not the federal poverty guideline number that you're supposed to be above the poverty line at that point, that ain't a lot of money to live off of, especially if you have a family or kids in school. Why are there some Democrats willing to not do the $15 minimum wage, even knowing that it would not have gone into effect right away? It would have been graduated. What are they going to come back with? $11, $12? What's the difference here?
Well, first of all, you have to understand this whole strategy, this whole debate is not about the realism of the argument, if that makes sense. It ain't about 12 or 15 or $20. It ain't about any of that. And we get caught up in that conversation too much to want to talk about the difference between the 12 and the 15 and the dollar. And that's not what it's about. They fooled and tricked us again. What it's about is ensuring that people on the bottom rungs of our economic ladder don't think that they have to work every day and work hard. Don't think that they can take 2 or 3 months off because now they got more money. In other words, some people equate lower wages with, as Doug Blackman calls it in his book, Slavery by Another Name. And they equate keeping people tethered to the need to work and work hard and do what I say by not paying them too much money. If you start paying them real big money, it's hard to keep them because they can quit your job, go get another job, making the same money or whatever, and they're not lost. be harder to control the workforce. If you start giving in and giving them too much money, keep them needing to work harder to gain and earn more money, even if it means that they got to work 2 jobs now and leave their kids alone. These economists, when I say economists, I'm talking about people who are really trying to make money off the economy, not the academic economists, not those people. These people don't care too much about family issues and what you're going to have to do with your 3-year-old while you're working 2, 3 jobs. They don't care about that. They are concerned about keeping the economy going and humming along and making sure businesses thrive. And once we learn that, we stop worrying about how people are going to have a living wage. You have to understand that people who are voting against the minimum wage raise, they don't care what you do with your 3-year-old. That's the first thing you got to understand. Because if you think they do care about that, then you can ask the question, well, let's discuss the difference between $12 and $15 and what will that buy and all of that. But you got to understand they don't care.
Well, and it's easy when a bunch of millionaires are in the Senate. I think there's maybe only like 3 that aren't millionaires, and then the rest of them are. And then on top of that, they get another $172,000 a year on top of their millions that they already have. So they're a bit removed from reality, I guess we could say, right?
Yeah.
You know, in the time we have left here, Val, one of the other things we talked about before we came on is this millionaire class. In the case of the Walton family, 6 of them are billionaires. Jeff Bezos with Amazon is a trillionaire. Mark Zuckerberg is a millionaire, 100 millionaire. You know, many times over. Bill Gates, people like that are billionaires, right? The reality is they don't pay any taxes hardly. And Warren Buffett's even said it. He says his secretary pays more in taxes than he does. And he's just, he claims he doesn't take any like extraordinary deductions or anything like that. But as a percentage of salary, his secretary pays more. One of the things I do know, Val, is that people who fall in sort of the middle, like me and you, we're the ones who foot the bill for everything. Not only do we foot the bill for it, if we were to make a mistake on our taxes or something happen, they come after us harder than they come after, you know, people like, you know, that are in the 1% end of things. In the time we have left here, knowing the composition of the House and Senate, knowing that the Recovery Act will probably go through to some degree and this $1.9 trillion gets out there, have you heard them talk any at all about any kind of real tax reform that would help people in the middle like us? Or are we back to this is really geared towards Wall Street, that trying to maintain the banks and the mortgage companies and all that, or what's going to happen? Even with the Biden-Harris administration, there's only so much we can hope for.
Well, the thing about it is this whole thing about tax relief and regulation, that was resolved when they passed the $2 trillion tax giveaway to the rich, to the 1%ers. Because in addition to that tax cut was a whole litany, a whole set of tax deregulations that got down. So they've gotten their prizes already. They've deregulated things. They've given them tax breaks. And now we're trying to help out the underclass who did not benefit from any of that. And then now they're coming back saying that's giving them too much. You know, $15 is too much. $1,400 is going to too many people. You know, extra $300 shouldn't be going to people who don't have jobs anymore. They are saying that that's too much. But when we talked about cutting taxes, when we talked about deregulation, I didn't hear them make a squeak. Nobody said anything about this was too much or this was going too far. I hate to say it, Ed, I've been a lifelong Democrat ever since I registered to vote the first time. and understood a little bit about politics, but I have got to say that my party allows itself to be out snookered too many times. We are not the smartest group ever. And something is going on and it needs to stop because we're not winning some of these races and some of these issues that we need. And I'll leave it with this. I talked on one of our earlier shows about all of the PhDs and JDs and MDs and all these other kind of initials that we have in front of behind our names in the Democratic Party. And when I look over there to the other side, I look at people like Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson, and even go back and look at Karl Rove and the late Rush Limbaugh and all of those kind of people. And they have one thing in common. None of them are college graduates, not a one, but they are outthinking us. And why is that? That they can come up with deals that all of our Phi Beta Kappas and Rhodes Scholars and people like that can't figure out a way how to stop them from doing what they want to do with the people that we are sworn to protect. Something is going on, and there is not necessarily a positive correlation between advanced education and street smarts. I know it's not. You got one group that's got street smarts and one group that's got advanced education, and the street smart guys are eating the advanced education guys' lunch. That's exactly what's happening. They're killing us.
Well, Val, thanks for making me feel good again, like you always do. And folks, we're running out of time, but I do want to thank Thomas McLaurin from the George Floyd Memorial Center, which will be located here in Raleigh, North Carolina, for coming in with us. He's going to be back from time to time. Go to the website. You should see the URL there. Go to the website, donate, volunteer, participate. Let's get this thing going. Like I always do, Val, before we leave, give me something to look forward to for the week. I mean, what are we thinking about in terms of either positive that we can look forward to in the coming week, or just something we need to look forward to?
Well, one of the things that I'm looking forward to is getting this bill passed through the Senate. I think it's going to happen. I think people are going to go ahead and get their $1,400 check. Most of the people. I think things are going to happen in a positive way as far as that's concerned. And maybe we can put that aside. Don't worry about that, and move on to the next agenda agenda item with the Democrats, which should be the John Lewis voting rights piece, and of course the George Floyd piece that we're trying to do here. So maybe we can get something done in the next round that the economic round didn't give us all we wanted, but the whole round about voting rights and criminal justice, we may get something done with that. Those are two big issues, Ed, because we need voting rights, and we're going to spend a whole show talking about that, I'm sure. And of course, we really need to spruce up on the race relations and police brutality.
Yeah, well, definitely. And with the Derek Chauvin trial starting, you're right, Val. We're going to spend some time next week talking about the George Floyd Act. It passed in the House. It now has to be dealt with in the Senate. I'm worried about these centrist Democrats. And then we want to talk about the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, because right now there's so many states that are trying to take away your right to vote, and we want to deal with that. Also next week, Dr. McFarland should be back, and we'll talk with her. We'll get caught up. Like I said, she's sunning in Jamaica this week, so we're jealous, Dr. McFarland. So we're gonna go the next time we go to Jamaica. But in the meantime, folks, look for this Derek Chauvin trial this week. See what happens in Minnesota. This will be indicative of what we really need to do for criminal justice reform. We're going to talk about that a lot over the next coming program. So anyway, but have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next Saturday on The Deal. Thanks a lot. Do something good for somebody today.